What kind of coins are going through your brain when you're thinking about this? Like, I guess you're clearly thinking about Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, maybe Dogecoin because people use it. Are there other coins that you're already thinking? I mean, you said proof of stake. I don't think any of those yet have proof of stake. So you're thinking about a few other. What are some of them? Without calling out everybody, the coins that you just think for big market shares. I better be thinking about those use cases.
Oh man, we really need to see. I honestly don't think any of the proof of stake networks currently, despite their market caps, have much fundamental usage beyond just like sort of speculation. And they're really much in the building stages right now, which isn't bad. But they're sort of growing, and we'll have to see what people start to use for. A lot of people are trying to say, oh, we're just gonna have this Ethereum clone or this Ethereum killer, and we're just gonna make something faster. It's like, well, that's done. It's done really well. It has like an extremely secure base layer security. So it remains to be seen. I think there's definitely some interesting technologies that are out there that might end up being, I think they'll end up being collaborative with Ethereum personally. That's my personal take, is that they'll start enabling other types of computations or other types of value that then you could potentially write proofs to the Ethereum chain or things like that. That I think they can all coexist. I think a world of thinking there's going to be one universal blockchain and nothing else, not hundreds of others, I don't think is really possible. I mean, we can't as humans agree on anything. We have, we don't even know how many countries there are, right? I mean, that's literally a statement. Like, how many countries are there in the world? Well, it depends who you're talking to. There's between 180 to 210, right? So to think that we're all just going to have one universal base layer, I think, isn't really going to happen. So there'll be room for a lot of these things to coexist and work together. So we'll really just see. But currently, I don't see any of the other high performance chain getting non-trivial adoption in things that Ethereum already is doing. And that's not intended to be a negative statement or an accusatory statement. It just, I think that's the way it is.
Okay. Are we talking about Cardano? Is that like the next? It's the third largest market cap, and it's the only proof of stake that's really up there in the top. I guess Solana's a proof of stake.
Yeah, I wouldn't even have Cardano even in the list I even just mentioned, because they're just like even pre, that's a whole nother game. But yeah, like Solana would be the one I think has the most universal interest in the technology. And I think that the most people I've talked to, VCs, projects, otherwise, it's very interesting, I guess, to put it that way. And then Avalanche also has a fairly novel consensus mechanism. Both of these, these chains though are doing what, like 1/10,000th the true value of something like Ethereum, but then they have market caps of like 10 to 20% of Ethereum. So you can see the speculative interest. And that's not to say they're bad, but their interest has definitely outgrown the true utility that they have, which, that is what it is. So again, I'm not even necessarily saying that's bad, or I'm not trying to throw shade on those, but that's just the state of, I think, of the real usage.
Really good observation. Are there any others that come in that list? When you think about Solana, AVAX, are there one or two others that are kind of around there?
Yeah, so Terra is very interesting, mainly because they now have the USD token and how that is minted on chain. And they have a really interesting economic model with Luna. So basically, to create UST, you need to burn Luna, which is kind of interesting. So, thinking about something like that, and it's a permissionless system. So think about, USDC on Ethereum. Let's say you had to burn Ether in order to mint USDC. Like, that's kind of an interesting concept. So there's getting to be more and more traction. And then particularly because Terra launching initially in Southeast Asia, having its Chai platform, I mean, they're literally in the billions of dollars of transacted already on chain, which, I mean, that's in like a couple of years. So that's real world utility and usage that also gets very interesting. So now trying to enable some of that now in the US, I mean, that's something we would love to be, work on with them. And we're close with them and have been, seeing what all this can look like. But now taking those assets, permissionlessly derived assets, you can now spend at, merchants across the US to get really interesting.
That's very exciting. Any other names come to mind?
On the proof of stake side, those would be, I think, the main candidates that you'd see for sure.
And proof of work?
Those would be the main, the current ones, right? So Ethereum and Bitcoin are really the, absolutely predominant around just everything. There's, I think, some slight mentions around just they've been around for a while and have certain communities around like Litecoin, and then like even Bitcoin Cash. That one's been really challenging just because it's gone through like 3 or 4 community splits, even since it split originally. But I do, I just have a little bit of a bias just because Bitcoin Cash, at least what it's trying to do in terms of its narrative, what Roger talks about is what I love. So that's the one thing where I still like, you look at it, it's like, I want to see this work. And I like this narrative, and it could be wrong, it could be right, but those are the things that get potentially used as money. I have a very, very strong preference for. So I'm very deep in the DeFi world and have been using a lot of these other products. But when something comes up that has some fundamental utility as money, I get very interested in it more naturally. So like earlier in the year with all the algorithmic stable coins, like that was something I jumped in very, very aggressively to figure out how they all worked, what could work. What did all these look like? What were the differences in like their applications? That was the stuff that I'm very passionate about.
Will that work at one point?
Oh man, great question. As of now, no. None of the algorithmic approaches have really been sustainable. And I'd say the one I see that has the most current sustainability is something like Frax, where they have a little bit of a hybrid model where it's partially fractionalized fractionally reserved with its own token. I think it's at something like 10 or 15% collateralized by its governance token. That's interesting. It's not really fully there, but see, this is also how a lot of it works is you create these experiments, you see how it works, and then going back to our early conversation, it happens at rapid scale. All this stuff, the boom and bust of every single one of these tokens, basis cash, empty set dollar, dynamic set dollar, like I could go in the whole list. They all like, crash, burned, then went up, then went down, everything else in like less than a year. All of it is only 12 months old. So it happens, you can iterate really, really quickly with this.